have to admit, I was pretty disappointed with how this whole storyline on Days of Our Lives has been playing out. I really thought we were about to see Kristen DiMera at her absolute ruthless best, especially when it came to dealing with Sophia. To me, it felt like the setup was perfect for Kristen to unleash the kind of calculated chaos she's famous for. Instead, what we got, at least on the surface, felt surprisingly restrained. I was wondering if maybe the writers were dialing her back a bit, because her whole stance of, "I wouldn't harm a teen," didn't quite match the Kristen we've come to know. Yes, she's intimidating Sophia and forcing her into this revenge scheme, but it almost felt too simple, too clean. And honestly, that made me think, maybe I was looking at it the wrong way. Because when I saw that moment between Kristen and Rachel Black, something clicked for me. The way Kristen explained that if you're not the brains of the operation, you're the fall guy, that didn't feel like a throwaway lesson. It felt like a warning, or maybe even a blueprint. To me, it suddenly started to look like Kristen isn't slipping, she's stalling. She's letting Sophia think she's part of the plan, letting her feel useful, even safe. But in reality, Kristen is still very much the mastermind, quietly setting the stage for something bigger, and possibly much colder. I think the real target here is EJ DiMera, and through him, Johnny DiMera. Sophia just happens to be the perfect pawn, motivated, involved, and ultimately disposable. Maybe I'm wrong, but it really feels like Kristen is building toward a moment where everything collapses at once, and Sophia is left holding all the blame. And if that's true, it's actually very on brand for Kristen. Not loud, explosive revenge, but slow, deliberate, and devastating. The kind where, by the time Sophia realizes what's happening, it's already too late. I didn't expect it to go this way, but now I'm starting to think this version might be even darker than what we originally hoped for. I think Friday's episode of Days of Our Lives is leaning hard into messy emotional choices, and honestly, I was wondering if any of these people are really being honest with themselves. So, from what I can tell, Sarah Horton and Brady Black are finally at that point where denial isn't working anymore. Sarah pushed back before, insisting nothing was going on, but now it feels like she's ready to see where this actually leads. And maybe I'm wrong, but it seems less about clarity and more about giving in to something that's been building for a while. Meanwhile, Xander Kyriakis almost shrugs the whole thing off. He already assumed Sarah and Brady were involved, so in his mind, this just confirms what he believed all along. And with Gwen Recheck already in his orbit, he's not exactly slowing down either. They both claim it's casual, no feelings attached, but I can't help thinking that in Salem, no feelings usually means feelings are coming, just messier. And with revenge still quietly lingering in the background, that situation feels like a ticking time bomb. Then there's Kristen DiMera, who to me is doing what she always does, rewriting reality to fit her narrative. Her conversation with Rachel Black really stood out. Instead of accountability, it's all about shifting blame. Somehow, they land on EJ DiMera as the problem, which, I didn't realize not ducking was now a crime. It feels like Kristen is doubling down, not just protecting Rachel, but convincing herself that none of this is actually on them. And then we have Leo Stark, who, honestly, might be the most self-aware and self-destructive at the same time. He's going in circles, overthinking every possible outcome between Javi Hernandez and Dimitri von Leuschner. One moment, he's convinced Dimitri is the safer choice. The next, he's spiraling again. It's like he knows whichever path he picks is going to cost him something. And just when he seems to settle on an answer, Javi throws in a curveball, suggesting to Rafe Hernandez that he might return. That part makes me think Leo's decision isn't going to hold for long. Overall, I feel like this episode is less about resolution and more about people choosing the chaos they're willing to live with, and maybe underestimating just how much it's all about to blow up. I think this episode really leans into manipulation and emotional crossroads. Almost everyone feels like they're playing a role, even when they're not entirely sure who they are anymore. It starts with Brady pulling Tate into what feels like a classic Salem scheme: take down Sophia. Over breakfast at the pub, the plan is laid out. Tate needs to get close to Sophia and somehow lift her handprint from a bottle. I was wondering if Tate fully realizes how messy this could get, because emotionally, he's already tangled up. What struck me is how Tate brings up Basic Black being a cover for John's ISA work. That's not just trivia. It's almost like he's suggesting Brady follow in John Black's footsteps, blurring the line between family legacy and questionable choices. And Brady even considers working with Steve Johnson, which makes me think he's inching closer to that same morally gray world. But Tate, he's clearly lost. Maybe I'm wrong, but the college storyline feels less about grades and more about identity. He's nearly flunking out, thinking about dropping out entirely, and Brady's reaction is interesting, disappointed, but still supportive. It's one of the few grounded, real conversations in the episode. Meanwhile, Kristen and Rachel's scenes hit a completely different emotional note. Rachel shutting herself off with Little Women feels symbolic, like she's retreating into a safer world. When she finally speaks, it's brutal. She tells Kristen DiMera she hates her. That moment almost pushes Kristen into revealing Marlena Evans' role in all this, but she stops herself. That hesitation says a lot. Still, they do patch things up, at least on the surface. Rachel admits she's hurt by Sophia's betrayal, which ties everything together emotionally. Kristen, interestingly, wants Rachel out of Bayview just as much as Rachel does, so she encourages her to play along with the doctor. And then Brady walks in, and everything explodes again. The argument between Brady and Kristen feels like the same loop they've been stuck in forever. Blame, defensiveness, zero resolution. What really lands, though, is Rachel yelling at both of them to stop. It's one of those moments where the child is clearly more emotionally aware than the adults. Out in the square, Marlena tries a softer approach with Sophia. And honestly, I didn't expect it to work, and it doesn't, at least not immediately. Sophia lashes out, but Marlena doesn't back down. For a second, it almost feels like she's getting through, until Tate calls and Sophia instantly shifts focus. That tells me Tate still has influence over her, whether she admits it or not. Their meetup is tense. Tate brings her favorite drink as a peace offering, which feels calculated. When he pushes her to stop the revenge, she sees right through him. She calls him fake, comparing him to Marlena, and walks away the second Holly shows up. To me, that scene confirms Sophia isn't just acting out. She's deeply defensive and suspicious of everyone. Then there's Holly and Ari, which surprisingly wraps up much faster than I expected. Holly confesses everything, Sophia drugging her, and Ari just accepts it. No drawn-out conflict, no lingering resentment. Maybe I'm wrong, but it almost felt too easy for a soap resolution. Still, the bracelet moment adds a subtle twist. Ari texting Liam and getting that cold response. Don't need, you can trash. That stings. It suggests whatever she thought that connection was, it clearly wasn't mutual. Stephanie's storyline, though, is where the emotional weight really hits. When Alex calls Steve and he rushes over, the panic attack scene feels raw. The knocked over candlesticks, the blanket, the fear, it all paints a picture of someone completely unraveling. Stephanie Johnson isn't just shaken, she's fundamentally changed. And when Steve gently brings up that a gun won't fix this, it feels like the show acknowledging that trauma isn't something you can just fight your way out of. Bringing Marlena in is the right move. She immediately reads the situation, the isolation, the fear, the loss of control. Stephanie blaming herself for everything is heartbreaking because it's such a real trauma response. And Marlena's answer, "Nothing is wrong with you," feels simple but necessary. I think the key takeaway there is connection. Marlena encourages Stephanie to surround herself with loved ones, which contrasts sharply with how many other characters in this episode are isolating themselves or manipulating each other. And then we circle back to the schemes. Sophia throws Tate's drink in the trash, rejecting both him and whatever plan he's trying to pull. But Tate pulling it right back out with a smile, that's the moment that made me pause. It's almost unsettling. He's enjoying the game now. At the same time, as Brady goes to speak with the doctor, Kristen tries to leave, and Rachel clings to her, begging her not to go. To me, that final beat sums up the whole episode. Everyone is pushing, pulling, scheming, or breaking. But at the center of it all are these fragile emotional bonds that no one quite knows how to handle. And honestly, that's what makes it feel like classic days. I think this whole story says less about hunger and more about how weirdly frustrating convenience has become. I was reading about Brian Datilla's experience, and honestly, I didn't realize how relatable it would feel until I pictured myself standing there at that kiosk. To me, it starts off simple enough. You finish a workout, you just want something quick, like chicken fingers and fries, nothing complicated. But then suddenly you're stuck scrolling through a breakfast menu that doesn't even apply to you, trying to find the one thing you actually want. I was wondering how something designed to be faster ends up slowing everything down. And then the social pressure kicks in, which might actually be the worst part. That moment where someone's standing behind you, clearly annoyed, kind of breathing down your neck. I think we've all been there. It's like the kiosk turns into a stage, and now you're performing ordering food under judgment. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's what really pushed the situation over the edge for him. What really got me, though, was how quickly the system broke its own rules. The employee tells him to use the kiosk, but then immediately lets someone else skip ahead and order directly. I didn't realize how frustrating that inconsistency is until you see it play out like this. It's not just about the food anymore. It becomes about fairness. Like, what's the point of the kiosk if people can just bypass it? And his reaction, I don't want sauce. I don't want a drink. I just want the chicken fingers and fries. I think that's the moment where it stops being about patience and starts being about principle. To me, it felt like he wasn't just arguing with the machine. He was pushing back against the whole setup. In the end, him walking out and going somewhere else feels almost symbolic. Like maybe the real solution isn't figuring out the kiosk. It's opting out of the system entirely. So kiosk that kind of sums it up perfectly. I think what makes this story stick is how small it is, but how quickly it escalates into something bigger. It's just food, but also not really just food. It's about time, respect, and how technology sometimes forgets the human part of simple interactions. I think the week of April 13th on Days of Our Lives is setting up something bigger than it first appears. It feels less like payoff and more like the calm before several storms collide. From my perspective, the whole situation with Chad DiMera is clearly being handled as a transition moment. I didn't realize at first how intentional the timing was, but it makes sense now. They're giving space before bringing him back with a new face. With Connor Floyd stepping in, I feel like the real question isn't just when Chad returns, but how different he'll feel emotionally. Sometimes recasts shift the tone of a character entirely, and I'm wondering if this version of Chad might come back with a heavier or even darker edge. Then there's Lexi Carver. And honestly, this is where things get unsettling. I was thinking her awakening would be a miracle moment, but the word unnatural changes everything. To me, it doesn't feel like a simple resurrection story. It feels like the beginning of a psychological or even sci-fi twist. If she doesn't remember Theo Carver or her past, that's already tragic. But if she comes back different, maybe even influenced or controlled in some way, that could spiral fast. And knowing Salem, miracles almost always come with consequences. On the DiMera side, I think E.J. DiMera and Gwen Rizek von Leuschner celebrating might be very premature. To me, their success feels like the kind that backfires hard a week or two later. These kinds of storylines usually come with a cost, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lexi herself becomes that cost. Meanwhile, Kristen DiMera is exactly where you'd expect her to be: angry, vengeful, and completely unwilling to take responsibility. I was wondering if her visit with Rachel Black might soften her, but it seems to be doing the opposite. If anything, it's pushing her deeper into scheming mode with Sophia Choi. The interesting twist here is strategy. Kristen encouraging Sophia to play nice with Marlena Evans and Tate Black feels less like peace and more like manipulation. About the evidence, this mango bottle situation, I think it's too straightforward to actually work. When Brady Black gets it tested, I have a feeling something will go wrong. Either the prints are smudged, missing, or maybe even planted. Soap operas rarely resolve mysteries that easily, and this one feels like it's meant to drag out and complicate things further. And then there's the Titan storyline, which I think might be the most grounded but quietly impactful arc this week. Maggie Horton-Kiriakis refusing to compromise her morals is admirable, but also risky. I didn't realize how fragile their situation was until now. If Titan's survival depends on crossing lines she won't cross, then we might be looking at a major shift in power. Losing both Titan and the Kiriakis estate, that would ripple across multiple storylines. Overall, I feel like this week is doing a lot of setup. The biggest tension, to me, comes from not knowing which storyline will explode first. Lexi's condition, Kristen's revenge, or the Titan fallout. If I had to predict, I'd say Lexi's arc is the one to watch most closely. It just feels like the kind of twist that could redefine everything around it. I think Thursday's episode of Days of Our Lives is setting up one of those emotionally layered days in Salem, where everything starts to shift at once. The biggest moment to me has to be Lexi Carver finally waking up. I didn't realize just how much weight this reveal would carry until now. Seeing her come face to face with Theo Carver again, it feels like one of those reunions that could either be heartfelt or quietly complicated, depending on how much time and truth has been lost between them. At the same time, I was wondering how long the truth could stay buried, because there's no way Abe Carver and Paulina Price avoid conflict forever. If Abe really does find out that Lexi has been alive this whole time, then this isn't just an argument. It's a betrayal that could shake their entire relationship. To me, that confrontation might be one of the most emotionally charged scenes of the episode. Then, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got E.J. DiMera and Gwen Rizchek celebrating. And honestly, with those two, I always feel like celebration means trouble for someone else. Maybe I'm wrong, but it really does seem like their plan, whatever it fully involves, is finally clicking into place. The timing alongside Lexi's awakening feels a little too perfect to be coincidence. Meanwhile, Leo Stark, shocking Dmitri von Leuschner, makes me think there's another twist brewing under the surface. Leo rarely shocks anyone without a bigger motive, so I can't help but feel like this moment is setting up something messy and possibly explosive. And then there's this subtle but interesting shift with Johnny DiMera and Chanel DiMera. I didn't expect Chanel to soften toward EJ at all, especially given her history with him. But now, after everything that's happened, especially the adoption situation, I think she's starting to see things differently. If Johnny tells her he's staying at DiMera, I was expecting tension, but it sounds like she might actually support him. And to me, that kind of reaction could surprise Johnny in the best way. Overall, I feel like this episode is less about big explosions and more about turning points, quiet decisions, emotional reunions, and plans finally coming together. And in Salem, those are usually the moments that lead to the biggest consequences. I think the week of April 13th through the 17th on Days of Our Lives is shaping up to be one of those turning point weeks, especially for Brady Black. It really feels like he's heading toward a major life pivot, and honestly, I'm wondering if everything happening with Rachel might finally push him to make a drastic decision. At the same time, Paulina Price being in big trouble makes me think something much deeper is brewing, possibly tied to everything going on with Lexi and the DiMera mess. Now, looking at midweek, I was thinking about this ongoing tension between Brady Black and Kristen DiMera. They're arguing again, and it's all centered on Rachel being in Bayview. Kristen blaming Marlena Evans and EJ DiMera feels very on brand to me, but I can't help wondering if she's about to escalate things legally, or not so legally. With Sophia Choi now in her orbit, it really seems like Kristen is thinking bigger. Maybe revenge on multiple fronts. I was wondering how far she'll go, especially if she's pushing Sophia to destroy EJ. And then there's Kat Green. Did she overhear enough to actually warn EJ? Although to me, even if she did, I feel like EJ would probably just brush it off like Kristen's always plotting something and not take it seriously enough, which could come back to bite him. Meanwhile, Holly Jonas trying to make amends really caught my attention. With Ariana Grace Horton arriving, I think this could reset a lot of dynamics. Holly explaining that her recent behavior was because of being drugged by Sophia adds a layer of tragedy to it. I didn't realize how much that storyline could shift sympathy back toward Holly. Then there's Tate Black, and I have to say, his plan feels surprisingly calculated. He's collecting Sophia's DNA from a discarded bottle. Very careful, very deliberate. I'm wondering if they're trying to tie it back to what was sent to Rachel. If that's the case, this could be the beginning of Sophia's downfall, or at least the first real step toward exposing her. On another front, Stephanie Johnson is clearly struggling, and I think her anxiety is becoming impossible to hide. Marlena Evans encouraging her to open up to Alex Kyriakis makes sense, but I was wondering if Stephanie might take a different route. If she confides in Jeremy Horton instead, that could complicate things emotionally. To me, Jeremy seems like the kind of person who would support anything she says, even something extreme like getting a gun, just to stay close to her. And that dynamic, it feels a little risky. By Thursday, things start shifting in a surprising way with Chanel Dupree DiMera. Her new attitude toward Johnny DiMera and EJ honestly caught me off guard. I didn't expect her to be so open to letting EJ back into their lives, especially around the kids. So when Johnny decides he wants to stay at DiMera, I think he's expecting resistance, but instead he might get acceptance, and that could completely change the family dynamic moving forward. Then we've got this really strange situation with Leo Stark and Dimitri von Leuschner DiMera. Leo considering going back to Dimitri makes me wonder if he's thinking clearly at all. If he's still dealing with concussion effects, his judgment might be completely off, and that could lead to another messy entanglement. At the same time, Gwen Rizek and EJ celebrating their payout from Dr. Rolf's project feels ominous. Anytime Rolf's involved, I immediately think there's a bigger consequence waiting around the corner. And then there's the tension between Paulina Price and Abe Carver. I was thinking this argument might not just be about Theo quitting DiMera. It feels deeper than that. Paulina questioning the sudden shift makes sense, especially since she knows about Lexi. But Abe, I think he just wants things to go his way and doesn't want any interference, even from Paulina. That dynamic feels like it's heading toward a bigger conflict. And finally, the moment that really stands out to me, Lexi Carver waking up, Theo sitting by her side, talking to her, and then her first word being his name. That feels like one of those classic emotional soap moments that actually lands. I didn't expect it to hit that hard, but to me, it feels like the beginning of something big, maybe hopeful, maybe complicated, but definitely important. I think Friday, April 10th is shaping up to be one of those classic, messy, dramatic days in Days of Our Lives where everything overlaps in the most chaotic way. I was wondering if Gwen celebrating with Xander Kyriakis Cook is really about him, or if it's all about that Versix payday. To me, it feels like she's using the moment as both a celebration and a distraction. Xander's clearly dealing with pressure after Maggie Kyriakis tore into him, plus the whole situation with Philip Kyriakis moving back into the mansion, with Gabby Hernandez no less, while Xander is basically being treated like an outsider. I didn't realize how much that might push him straight into Gwen's arms again, and yeah, probably into the bedroom too. Then there's Javi surprising Rafe Hernandez. I'm actually really curious about this return. I think what matters most isn't just that Javi's back in Salem, it's who he brings with him. I can't help but wonder if his new boyfriend is part of the surprise, because that could complicate things instantly, especially with Leo still emotionally tangled. Speaking of Leo, I find it interesting that he pumps the brakes with Dimitri. To me, that suggests some clarity might finally be creeping in. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like Leo knows deep down he can't move forward until he gets real closure with Javi. And the fact that he's still wearing his wedding ring, that's not nothing. If Javi walks into the Salem Inn and finds Dimitri there, yeah, that could be the end of whatever they still have left. Kristen going off on EJ DiMera, I mean, I didn't expect anything different. I think she's still laser focused on blaming him for Rachel being in Bayview. But I'm more interested in what she does next. Has she moved back into the DiMera mansion? And more importantly, how exactly is she planning to use Sophia against EJ? Because that feels like the real play here. Now, Sarah and Brady. I think this is less about romance and more about timing. If Sarah hears that Xander is moving on, or at least acting like he is, it might push her to do the same. I can totally see her flipping that switch and deciding there's no reason to hold back anymore. Looking ahead to the week of April 13th through the 17th, Stephanie possibly going after a gun really stood out to me. I was thinking, this doesn't feel like a simple empowerment move. It feels reactive, like she's still deep in that PTSD. If she goes to Steve Johnson, I actually think he might shut it down, at least for now. And her pulling away from Alex, that just reinforces that she's not in a place to move forward emotionally. Kat preparing for Stefano DiMera's will reading. I feel like that event is going to explode in ways nobody expects. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but between EJ potentially being blindsided and Sophia lurking as Kristen's weapon, it feels like a setup for multiple reveals hitting at once. Brady possibly joining Black Patch, I think that actually makes sense for his character right now. He needs direction, and this gives him purpose. Plus, with Tate pushing for justice against Sophia, it lines up perfectly. I was wondering if that evidence bottle becomes the key to bringing her down. And then there's the huge twist. Abe learning Lexi is alive. That's not just shocking, that's destabilizing, especially if he finds out Paulina knew and didn't tell him. To me, that feels like a breaking point in their marriage, particularly with Theo being caught in the middle. Kayla being appalled at EJ's science also feels like the beginning of consequences finally catching up to him. I don't think Salem University Hospital will just brush this off. And then Joy coming back with Alex's baby, that's just more emotional chaos waiting to unfold. Finally, with Jeremy on his way out and a new Chad DiMera coming in, I think the timing is intentional, especially if EJ starts realizing that Kat played him, and if Leo follows up on Dimitri's suspicion that she's actually ISA. That could flip everything. Overall, I feel like this is one of those weeks where every storyline starts colliding. Maybe I'm wrong, but it really looks like Salem is about to hit a tipping point. Here's my take on what's coming up on Days of Our Lives for Friday, April 10th, 2026. And honestly, there's quite a bit to unpack. I think the biggest question mark right now revolves around Brady Black and Sarah Horton. From where I'm standing, their relationship has been building steadily, even with a few bumps along the way. Nothing too dramatic has managed to derail them, which makes me wonder if the show is intentionally setting them up for something bigger. Now that they're about to take things to the next level, I find myself asking what that really means. Is this about deepening their emotional commitment? Or are we heading into a more serious, life-changing step like moving in together? I didn't get the sense it's just a fleeting moment. It feels more significant than that. Then there's Gwen Rizchek, and I have to say, it finally seems like she can breathe again. With Dmitri von Leuschner backing off and essentially giving up his fight, I was thinking this could be a turning point for her. Letting go of the accusations and agreeing to move forward with the divorce feels like a huge shift. To me, it's not surprising she'd want to celebrate. And of course, she ends up doing that with Xander Cook, which could open another door entirely. Their dynamic always has that unpredictable edge. At the same time, I don't think peace is going to last very long elsewhere. When Kristen DiMera confronts EJ DiMera, I was immediately thinking, this is going to escalate fast. Those two never do anything halfway, and sibling tension in that family usually means fireworks. It's the kind of confrontation that could easily spiral into something much bigger than either of them expects. Meanwhile, Leo Stark starting to get cold feet about Dmitri is interesting to me. I can't help but wonder if this hesitation is coming from instinct or if he knows more than he's letting on. Either way, it doesn't feel like a good sign for whatever future they might have been heading toward. And then there's Javi Hernandez. I was a bit surprised to see him pop back into the picture, especially with the way he reconnects by surprising Rafe Hernandez. That kind of entrance usually means something important is about to unfold, and I get the feeling his return isn't just a quick visit. It might shake things up in Salem in ways we're not fully seeing yet. Overall, I think this episode is setting the stage for several turning points at once. Romance deepening, conflicts reigniting, and a few unexpected twists creeping in. I may be wrong, but it definitely feels like one of those episodes where small moments lead to much bigger consequences. I think this whole sequence really plays like a turning point for both Brady and Tate. And honestly, I didn't expect their dynamic to feel this layered. When they meet at the pub, there's this underlying tension, not just about Rachel, but about everything spiraling around them. They're relieved Sophia isn't there, which already says a lot about how dangerous she's become in their eyes. The whole Pillgate plan feels a bit desperate to me, like they're clinging to anything that might finally take her down. Brady fingerprinting the bottle? That's when I started wondering if he's crossing into territory he can't fully control.